channeler Jane Roberts, and Seth. My name is Bill. Welcome to the Night Terrors Weekend Show. And we're starting right now. My Banned by YouTube series drops an episode every Wednesday morning. You don't have to watch it at 5:30 in the morning. You can wait till later in the day if you want to, but it's appreciated if you do. YouTube said, take down 3 years of your videos, so I had to do it. These videos are no longer on the channel. The only way you can see them is to catch them on Wednesday. Welcome, Verpeen. If you value what I do on the Night Terrors streams and in the Night Terrors videos, welcome David Bryce. And in the Night Terrors videos, one way to support the channel is through Patreon. Become a patron of the show by clicking on the Patreon link in the description below. Thank you for supporting the show. Welcome to Eldergrown and Takahama Plateau. Welcome to Gotcha Man and Verpeen. Welcome to David Bryce. And welcome to, I'm going to allow that chat. Elder, thank you for the super chat. Elder says, I'm here every Saturday. Zromingo says, yo, chat's quiet. What's that, an advertisement? Peaky.com brings real viewers, and let's remove that advertisement. And to do that, we just go, where do we click on the name? And we're going to block here. Or ban. Let's ban instead. Welcome to Jock11, and Shane Riley has arrived. Jock11 says, good evening to everyone. Welcome, Shane. Let's get rid of this guy. Rhino Rex is here. Welcome, Rhino. Let's get started. Rhino says, sorry, no suggestions today. Starting college. Spent the day catching up. Oh, better you than me, buddy. Let's continue. One Sean Bond has arrived. Welcome, Sean. Green Tea is here. Elder says, oh dear, college. My sentiments exactly. Here at unexplainedstuff.com is an article entitled Mediums and Channelers Jane Roberts, 1929 to 1984. Is there an author here? I should really look for this before the show starts. No author listed. But it is posted on the Mediums and Channelers forum. Jonathan A. says, good gosh doggin' evening to Bill and all who dwell here. Welcome, Jonathan. Rhino Rex says, tell me about it. It's been over 30 years since I had homework. My wife felt like she was herding a giant cat trying to keep me on task. Elder says, but that would be like vetting content, and everyone knows we don't do that here. Thank you, Elder. Oh, true. And the anonymous author begins. Good to see you too. Good to see you as well, Sean. On September the 9th, 1963, 34-year-old Jane Roberts had finished her dinner and was sitting down to her usual evening session of writing poetry. Her artist husband, Robert Butts, was in his studio 3 rooms away, working on his painting. Roberts picked up her pen and stared at the blank piece of paper, waiting for the creative juices to begin flowing. She had no reason to suspect that this night would be any different from the others in her life. All at once she found herself in the throes of an experience she could only liken to a drugless trip. Now there's something you'd only hear from people born in the 60s. Between one normal minute and the next, a fantastic avalanche, this is a quote, of radical new ideas burst into my head with tremendous force, as if my skull were some sort of receiving station, tuned up to unbearable volume. She wrote later, describing the experience, quote, "Not only ideas came through this channel, but sensations, intensified and pulsating. I was connected to some incredible source of energy." Thank you, Verpine, for the suggestion. Copying now. By the way, this first topic, Jane Roberts' channeler, was suggested by Vasilios Vakagias. Somewhere in there is his name. Thank you, Verpine, and thank you, Vasilios. All at once she found herself in the throes of an experience. I already read that part. The startled young woman had no time to call out to her husband, but her pen began feverishly to cover the page before her with a multitude of thoughts and feelings. Consciousness and reality were turned around, and the thoughts she was receiving seemed to be invading her mind and taking up permanent residence. Feeling and knowing became one and the same thing. One and the same thing, one might even say. And the importance of intellectual knowledge paled before the sensation of wisdom gained beyond the power of reasoning. At the same time this was happening, a small part of Robert seemed to remember that this same scenario had been enacted the night before in a dream she had forgotten. Somehow she knew the two experiences were connected. When she returned to full consciousness, Roberts found herself giving a little to the barrage of words. My eyes are getting old. I better magnify these words. Whoops. Wrong place to magnify. Can I go back with a minus? Thank you, I can. Okay. We want to go here and magnify. Okay, try again. Oh, much better. Let's not do it that much magnification. When she returned to full consciousness, welcome, Brooke Birch. Saying hello to all. Welcome, Brooke. Roberts found herself giving a title to the barrage of words that had streamed across the paper in front of her. The physical universe of idea construction. The title seemed to fit the hastily scribbled notes, but none of the material fit anywhere into Robert's previous convictions regarding life. The sudden paranormal experience had turned her world upside down and would eventually lead to a series of dramatic events that would forever change her life. Jane Roberts and Rob Butts bought a book on extrasensory perception, and they decided to try some experiments with an old Ouija board their landlady found in the attic. The first 2 times they tried to move the planchette, nothing happened. Neither of them were surprised, for they had little faith in the board's capabilities. On the 3rd try, they were both amazed when the planchette began to move across the board, spelling answers to their questions. The couple found out they had contacted an entity calling itself Frank Withers, who claimed to have lived in their New York town of Elmira and had passed away there in the 40s. The spirit provided other details of his life on Earth, and Jane Roberts and Rob Butts were surprised when the information actually checked out in the town records. On December the 8th, 1963, the spirit of Frank Withers said, while he had lived a rather colorless existence by that name, he preferred to be addressed as Seth, because it better suited the whole self that he was trying to be. He went on to say that from his perspective, Rob would better be named Joseph and Jane Rupert. After that session, which lasted until after midnight, Roberts was convinced that Seth was an aspect of either her or Butt's subconsciousness. She could not accept the idea that Seth might represent a separate entity that had survived death. In subsequent sessions, she was determined to resist the development of mediumship that was apparently growing stronger within her each time they sat down at the Ouija board. Then, on the evening of December 15th, Roberts felt a great rush of words welling up within her. She felt nearly choked up with piles of nouns and verbs in her head. And then, without really knowing how or why, she says, "I opened my mouth and let them out." Seth was no longer restricted to the Ouija board. He was now able to speak through Jane and deal with the complex subjects that changed their response to the universe and their own role within it. There seemed little in either Roberts' or Butt's early lives to which a psychical researcher might point and reach a clear conclusion that a spirit medium or channel was in the making. Growing up in Saratoga Springs, New York, which has a nice race course, by the way, for horses. As far as Roberts could remember, she had never demonstrated an extrasensory ability before the arrival of Seth. She had begun writing poetry as a child and had always been creative, but there was nothing to indicate that the girl would grow into a psychic of substantial ability. Her parents divorced, and Roberts had lived with her mother as they struggled to make ends meet. It had been a poetry scholarship that got her into Skidmore and out of her relentlessly poor life. Her husband was a product of what Jane called middle-class American social Protestantism. A talented painter, his role in accumulating what would later come to be called the Seth material was from the first that of scribe and questioner. They seldom used a tape recorder during their twice-a-week sessions, but he maintained meticulous notes. He observed the subtle changes in Roberts, or Seth, as he carefully transcribed Seth's words verbatim. And he had the pleasure of conversing with Seth, something that Roberts at times wished that she were able to do. At first, Roberts had been reluctant to give too much to Seth, or give in too much to Seth, and she insisted on being able to keep her eyes open while she paced around the room, I guess while in trance. T. Plateau says, Saratoga Springs is close to you, isn't it? Yes, it is. It's 30 minutes away. 45 minutes away. Later, she liked to sit in a rocker while in trance. And though she went through a period of closing her eyes for a couple of years, she returned to opening them through half-lidded eyes. Seth usually announced his presence by taking off Robert's glasses and casting them to the floor or a nearby piece of furniture. Not too much respect for his channel. The volume of his voice went through various stages of development. It was resonant and conversational, but on occasion boomed out an extraordinary volume. Both Roberts and her husband were greatly affected personally by the lessons learned from their sessions with Seth. Butts benefited from what Seth termed inner visual data, and he even received a few useful art instructions from this unusual friend. Roberts saw her talent latent. Robert saw her latent psychic abilities flower under Seth's tutelage. She received specific instructions from Seth on how to develop telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. Of particular interest to her were her out-of-body experiences, which sometimes occurred under curious circumstances while she was in trance with Seth. Those such books as The Seth Material, there's no ending to that clause. Oh, through such books as The Seth Material and Seth Speaks, Jane Roberts essentially created a renewed interest in contemporary spirit mediumship, which was now updated as channeling, likening the psychic sensitive to a television set receiving channels telecast to it. Central to an understanding of the Seth Material is an awareness of the entity's basic teaching, that all reality is created by thought and emotion. All reality exists in your head, I guess, right? Jonathan A. says, "Hey, Bill, I'm enjoying some whiskey and the kind folk here. How are things at your side? Can't drink anymore or else my weight will shoot up. Because when I drink, I eat. Other than that, really good. Do I miss drinking? Not really." And totally lost my place now. Not your fault, John. My favorite spelling of Jonathan is the way Jonathan spells it. Jon. Where is channeling, chilling, central to understanding thought and emotions. Specifically, what a person thinks and feels forms his or her surrounding reality. Thinking, creating reality. This process of reality building is not static, however, but dynamic. Therefore, reality is constantly changing, and it follows that a conscious awareness of this process can change any reality for the better. No one is at the mercy of past events. An individual should not blame his or her parents, or his church, or his schooling, or her schooling, or any other person or event for making him or her the way they are. In ignorance, one may have made oneself unhappy, but with conscious awareness, that person can make themselves happy and productive. Because individuals create their own reality, they can therefore change it. I guess that's true. I don't know if what you think creates all reality. It may create your reality, or my reality may be created by what's locked in my head. And yes, I do believe you can change that by, and it's no one else's, I also believe it's no one else's fault. And I believe you can change that by altering how you think. Yeah, I believe that. Seth's belief in mind as the builder expands the concept of human personality in a unique way. Since thoughts and emotions are believed to create reality, then dreams too have a separate reality. When individuals dream of themselves, how can you help but do that? You're the observer in the dream, right? They are seeing a fragment of their own personality, such as the probable self, identified by Seth. According to the spirit entity, each individual has a counterpart in other systems of reality. These are not identical selves or twins, but other selves who are part of the whole person, developing ideas in a different way. Sounds almost like, maybe, was it the Three Faces of Eve there? Each of these probable selves represents a portion of the whole self, existing in a different dimension. Yet all are part of the whole self. According to Seth, these various realities merge in the overall perceptions of the whole self, and ultimately the inner ego must bring about comprehension on the parts of the simultaneous selves. Each portion of the whole self must become aware of the other parts. End quote. Seth also maintained that all layers of the whole self continually exchange information on a subconscious level. In such terms, Jane Roberts may then have been a physical manifestation of the personality that she channeled, Seth. She may even have been one of his probable selves. Wait a minute. That's going a little bit above and beyond there. So she's a part of Seth? She's one of Seth's probable selves? Okay. She could have been a part of a completely other whole self, separate from the whole self of which Seth was a part. In other words, her own self? Roberts continually attempted to better understand the relationship she had with Seth and to explain the true nature of their connection. On February 26th, 1982, Roberts was hospitalized for an underactive thyroid gland, severe arthritis, and other complications. Through the years of their spiritual interaction, Seth had provided suggestions to ease certain of her physical conditions. But nevertheless, she died less than 2 years later on September the 5th, 1984. Less than 2 years? More than 2 years later. Her husband has continued disseminating the Seth material and completed 2 books on which they had been working before his wife's death. It is difficult to place Jane Roberts in a category, for she herself refused any attempts to analyze either her trance abilities or the phenomenon of Seth. The material that Seth imparted to her was not often seen in traditional examples of mediumship. It may take years before the Seth material can be appropriately evaluated. Rapine says, "All I want to know is who is the keymaster and who is the gatekeeper." I think that may be a Ghostbusters reference. All right. It is now 23 minutes past the hour. Time for our first viewer suggestion. And we are going to go to one from Eldergrown first. And that is, I think it's right here. Looks pretty cool. Brazilian UFO. Here at UFOfeed.com is a story by UFO Naughter. Sources, translated version, Albert Rosales Humanoid Encounters. Portuguese original source. Interesting. It's a PDF. We see that. Where's the original source? It may not be on the web anymore. Let us find out. Oh, yeah, it is. Let's save this to the show folder. And can we access the show folder? Yes, we can. This ought to go away. This ought to expand. I do not see an author here because I do not read the language. Ooh, cool picture. Yeah, I don't know who wrote it. How do you say bye in Spanish? I don't see any names up here. Unless it's this. Estudos sobre discos voladores? Anyway, we'll take a look at these cool pictures momentarily. Let's check out the text. That would be a negative, Jonathan. I just don't have the time. I've thought about it a couple of times. And the story is entitled 1968 Brazilian Encounter with rectangular robotic-like beings, which telepathically spoke to witness. The witness, Mr. Henry Schneider, Jr., an industrial chemist, residing about 5 kilometers from the center of Joinville, rose and went to check the fire on the pottery oven in his property. In his property, it says here. Good job translating there, buddy. On his property, since the oven had to be on constantly at a specific temperature. After ascertaining that everything was in order, he walked a few steps, stopped, and when he was about to light a cigarette, he came across a strange object in the courtyard of his pottery building, about 5 meters away from where he was standing. So there's the pottery kiln. And there he is. In the picture, he's kind of a funny-looking guy. And I cannot help but show you. Looks like a guy from a comic strip, kind of. Looks almost like a Simpsons character. And looks like there were 2 objects in front of him. Oh, no, wait. Is that the kiln or is that the lander? There's his car. Where's the kiln? I guess that's not the kiln. I guess the kiln is not shown in this picture. Maybe we should just read on and find out. That's the ship, confirms Elder. Welcome Implosion Retro Gaming. And good evening. Can we make this go down a little bit here? Oh, it's going to stay like that no matter what, so I might as well keep it like that. Startled but not frightened. He felt paralyzed. He couldn't move. He described the strange artifact as cone-shaped and tapered on the top, measuring about 4 meters high by 2.5 meters in diameter at its base. It was seated on a tripod. From the bottom, a bright light illuminated the ground. There was a rectangular opening on the craft, from which a kind of conveyor belt emerged, which did not actually touch the ground, although it seemed solid. At the lower end of the belt, there was a figure, which looked like a screen, rectangular in shape, measuring about 1.5 meters high by 0.5 meter wide. Behind the first figure, about 5.5 meters in a straight line on the same conveyor belt, there was another similar figure. The lower end of the conveyor was about 5 meters from the observer, who thought to ask what they were doing, but couldn't speak. So he sees 2 screens on this conveyor belt, which it's hard to tell from this. I mean, they should not have had the shadow meeting the end of the conveyor belt if it didn't touch the ground, right? So just imagine this shadow as being a little bit away from the end of the conveyor belt here. And so there were two screens on the belt. Maybe viewing screens? Or camera screens of some kind? Elder says, I imagine the drawing is not to scale. Huh. Supposedly there's some images here on Imgur. Let's try this one first. The same one. Let's try the next one. I'm surprised these are still at Imgur. Ooh. That doesn't look like a screen. These look like two cylinders. What happens if we make it bigger? Can we open in a new tab? Thank you. There's this home all lit up. Ooh, nice wraparound porch there, pal. Light coming from the bottom of it. They didn't accomplish that too well. Slightly, but. Eldergrown says maybe they had a texture like a window screen. Yeah, considering the level of translation here, you could be right. He could not speak, but as an answer to his thoughts, an answer came to his mind, apparently coming from the figure before him. Schneider heard the following in his mind. We are checking the heat and smoke on this site. At the time, Schneider had burnt some tires in his outside oven, and it had produced a lot of smoke and heat. Yeah, tires go up like a house afire. For about 10 minutes, while the figures were in sight, Schneider asked numerous questions, all mentally, and not all received immediate responses, but they seemed to come from the nearest figure. Among many of the questions, the observer remembers the following questions and answers. Maybe figure means something else in the original language. Maybe screen is translated differently in the other language. Well, Schneider, how do you live and eat? The being said, we eat by impregnation, a natural diet unlike yours. Impregnation, natural diet unlike yours. Is the diet unlike yours? Is the method of eating unlike yours? What is your means of propulsion? By means of attraction at 360,000 revolutions per second. They came from outer space, from a star which Schneider could not remember the name. It was something like the word MERS. They were governed by a chief, and each had a specific function, like the members of a beehive. European says, kind of reminds me of the robots from Interstellar. Were those not cool robots? The interstellar robots, wow. The guy who thought that up, that was really cool, those robots, man. They're stars in their own right. Each had a specific function. Quote, as one inside a unit and unable to get out, end quote. They traveled a certain route or mission and had come directly to see what was causing the heat. They promised to return to establish new contact. The whole time the figure was in sight, Schneider did not seem to be able to take his eyes from it. As the conveyor belt was withdrawn without any noise, the observer was able to move forward, but always keeping the same distance. He could see 3 points of bluish light on the object, resembling windows. Through one of these points of light, he could see another figure that looked like a box. The object wasn't bright except for the bluish windows and the light emitted from underneath. The ship and the figures appeared to be gray in color. The color of aluminum, the grays. He saw the grays. What year was this? (1968), before the grays became popular, so to speak. The color of aluminum. Once the conveyor belt was collected inside the object, the door closed, and with a slight noise, followed by a slight sound reminiscent of what the door of a household refrigerator produces when it's closed. Shoo. The object then rose rapidly in a vertical direction, emitting a sharp hissing sound. In the center of its bottom, the witness could see an intense blue light, resembling that of a welding torch, and something like concentric rings, also blue, which seemed to be turning. At about 10 meters in height, the object flew towards the south, and in a few seconds was just a point of light in the sky. The departure of the object produced a violent suction of air, which dragged Schneider to where the object had been. Now that, to me, sounds like the first clue that this was a real experience and not something out of a dream. If he remembers his body being violently dragged by the suction of the air, that's like the kind of thing I don't think somebody would think of in their head if it was like a remembered dream or something like that. There he felt strong heat and noticed a strong odor resembling kerosene, which permeated the air. The next day at the landing site, Schneider found a circle of about 16 centimeters in diameter, which was burned into the ground. 8 or 10 tiles of pottery which were close to the landing site were loose or broken. An old truck which was parked nearby had several problems. I assume new problems. Because the battery, the dynamo, and the starter were burned out. Whatever the dynamo is. One night about 5 months later, Schneider, for no apparent reason, left his house and felt he should look up to the sky. He then saw a bright object crossing the sky at a very high rate of speed. There were other witnesses to this event. Cool. That's the end of that. Let's check out those PDF pictures. Here's the original. Verpain says, needless to say, what we have here is a failure to communicate. That was not a very good impression. It was, of course, Martin Struthers who delivered that famous line in Cool Hand Luke. Oh, interesting. So this is the detailed version of what he saw. Can we open a picture here? No, we can't. Can we make the picture bigger? And then you want to zoom in, which should be here. Yeah, that's kind of unsimilar to what he described. Society of Brazil, of the study of something discs. So this is might not be from his experience. And these things probably nothing he had seen. Where is his experience? Let's go down a little bit. Or a lot of bit here. Are we page down? Yes. Where's his experience? That looks like the courtyard right there, right? Schneider, it says here. Okay, so that's what the courtyard looked like. That roof could use some work. But maybe that's... No, that's not the same roof over here. There's the burnt part of the ground. He took a picture. Why did that happen? I guess I better use this. Picture of the courtyard, where the object landed, where he stood. The two beings, two entities, or sensors, or whatever they were. Welcome to Caribbean rum with coconut liqueur. Yeah, Jane Roberts is the first 23 minutes, my friend, Caribbean rum. There's a picture we've seen already. And then it goes on to other things. Eyes that are luminous buttons is someone else's experience. So his pictures end there. There's the circular burned area. Groovy. Next up at 42 minutes past the hour. A suggestion from Takahama Plateau. And that is, folks, we got to return this to where it was, which means this has to go here. This can now go here. And this must go back. And that is Kisaragi Station, 2004. Where is Hasumi? Let's find out. Bunch of YouTube videos on that. Exploring the urban legend. Kisaragi Station Hasumi translation. That live journal. That's the only title with both terms in it so far. Here at Mackenzelgen at Mackenzelgen.livejournal.com, entitled Kisaragi Station, Hasumi translation. We got a Russian ad up here, a Cyrillic ad at least. What? This is weird. Let's check it out. We better count this to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5. Asumi. This may just be my imagination, but is it okay if I post? Anonymous, go ahead. Anonymous, what's going on? Asumi. I've been riding the train for a little while now, and something is strange. It's the same train I always take, but it hasn't stopped at a station for about 20 minutes. It always stops after 5 or 7 or 8 minutes at the most. The only people riding it are me and 5 others, but they're all asleep. You're not going to get off the train or anything like that, are you? Like you said, there's a possibility I've gotten on the wrong train. I'll hang in there a little longer. If something weird happens, I think I'll ask you guys for advice. Well, for now, why don't you go to the front car and find a conductor? Go check on him. Asumi. It doesn't look like we're going to be stopping soon, so I'll go check. There are blinds or something over the windows, so I didn't see any conductor. I'm on Shizuka's private railroad. Private railroad? Then you must know what you're riding on, right? And how often it stops. What if you try knocking on the window? I did. There was no reply. Can you see what's outside the window, like names of other stations you pass by? We've slowed down a bit since coming out of the tunnel. Although there isn't usually a tunnel. It's the train that starts at Shin Hamamatsu. It looks like we're going to stop at a station. You're not going to get off, are you? We're stopped at Kisaragi station now. Should I get off? Says Hasumi. I've never seen or heard of the station before. You should definitely get off. Stay on until the final destination. Well, then Anonymous is contradicting itself. First it says you should definitely get off. And then Anonymous says, stay on until the final destination. I got off, says Hasumi. It's an unmanned station. The train I was on left at 11:40, I believe. Makita Bodyguard. A new character. I can't find anything on Kisaragi station. Anyway, that means Hasumi's train has been going for an hour? Anonymous says, Kisaragi station is not turning up anywhere. Hasumi says, I thought I tried taking the train back, so I looked for a timetable. I couldn't find one. The train is still here. Would it be safer to get back on? And as I write this, the train has left. Anonymous says, are there any buildings nearby that look like there may be people in them? It must be cold. Take care of yourself. Asumi says, I'll leave the station and look for a taxi. Thank you. Anonymous, that's a good idea. Be careful. What device is he talking on? This is from 2009. Did I have a cell phone in 2009? When did everybody get cell phones? Anonymous, the last train of the night arriving at an unmanned station. I doubt it will be easy to find a taxi. Anonymous continues, and thus Hasumi became a resident of the second dimension. Asumi, there was no taxi or anything. What should I do? Find a station attendant or go to a police box. Dial 110. Or call a taxi company. Look it up in the phone book. Asumi, I called my house and asked my parents to come pick me up. But they don't seem to know where the station is either. They said they'd look it up on a map and come get me, but I'm kind of scared. Okay, what is Hasumi Station? I mean, Kisaragi Station. Urban Legends Wiki. The Roosevelt Review. Exploring the urban legend of Kisaragi Station. By Quan Hu Meng, also known as Catherine, at therooseveltreview.org. This chilling legend first appeared in 2004 on the Japanese message board 2channel, where a user named Hasumi shared her strange experience as it happened. Her posts described how a routine train ride turned into a nightmare journey to a place that didn't exist. Hasumi's story begins with her train passing her usual stop and continuing into an unfamiliar rural area. Eventually, the train stopped at a deserted station called Kisaragi, which does not appear on any maps, or any map. She describes stepping off into a quiet, unsettling place with no people or signs of life. As she tried to find help, she encountered strange noises and a mysterious old man who warned her to leave quickly. Her final posts described someone or something approaching before she disappeared, leaving her online audience in suspense. While the station is fictional, it has parallels in real life. The phenomenon of phantom stations has been documented in Japan, where abandoned rail stops from defunct trail lines still exist. A Japan Times article in 2020 explored the eerie appeal of these forgotten places. Likewise, ghostly train stories appear in Japanese media. This is the movie called Kisaragi Station. It's the promotional poster. Welcome, Maccabeus. I'm taking small swallows because I want to get the most bang for my buck. To get a sense of how this legend resonates with young people, I spoke to 2 high school juniors from Eleanor Roosevelt High. Annie Lang shared, "The story of Kisaragi Station is creepy because it makes you wonder if you could accidentally slip into a place from which you cannot come back." Yi Zhang added, wait, these are both Japanese names, apparently. Annie Liang. And actually, that's Yi Shang. But they went to Eleanor Roosevelt High School? There's an Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Japan. Anyway, Yi Shang added, "It's especially scary that she was posting online the whole time, but no one could help her. It makes the story feel real." Online forums like Reddit's Unsolved Mysteries often discuss the story. One user suggested the legend reflects fears about being lost in Japan's declining rural areas, while another argued it might just be a well-crafted internet hoax designed to entertain readers. But the legend of Kisaragi Station continues to fascinate people because it blends fear with timeless mystery. It's an urban myth, and it reminds us how little we truly know about the world's hidden corners. Looks like Elder can't find the movie. Is that what it is? Is that the movie you're looking for? Looks like there are many stories on the PDF. Right, that's the previous topic. I don't see it on Amazon. Probably hard to find, says Elder. Found a copy on eBay from Japan if you want to pay $70. Does it have English subtitles? Also, that's not our region. That's not our DVD region, so be careful. Unless you have a region free or a Welcome Ryu 1972 or a region 0 DVD player. Of course, ostensibly you could convert it to region 0 on your computer. You'd have to do some computer research, probably internet research on how to do that. It may look like I'm thirsty. Oh, thank you, Gotcha Man. You're so kind. Yeah, if I ever have to go overseas, I'm definitely taking the boat, not the plane. It'd be nice to go by boat, you know? Maybe you could get on a, some kind of a freighter or something for cheap. I don't mind if it takes me a long time to get there. Rather do that than fly. And now at 57 minutes past the hour, time for a suggestion by Gotcha Man, which is right here. The Falcon Lake incident is Canada's best documented UFO case, even 50 years later. Is the title of the story, written by Darren Bernhardt at cbc.ca. Mr. Bernhardt begins. Stan Michalak can still vividly remember when his father came home sick and injured after something happened in the Falcon Lake woods in Manitoba on the long May weekend of 1967. The long May weekend. I guess up there, Gotcha Man, one of your weekends in May is a long weekend? It was something that put his family life into upheaval. It remains one of the world's best-known UFO encounters. Michalak, who was 9 years old at the time and was allowed to see his dad for a couple of minutes, on the day after what soon became known as the Falcon Lake incident, said, "I recalled seeing him in bed. He didn't look good at all. He looked pale, haggard. Then there was the smell. He said, when I walked into the bedroom, there was a huge stink in the room, like a real horrible aroma of sulfur or a burnt-out motor. It was all around, and it was coming out of his pores. It was bad," said Michalak, who co-authored the book, They Appeared, with Winnipeg UFO researcher Chris Rutkowski. The book was launched in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the incident. He said, "I was very afraid. My father had been injured and I didn't know anything about it. Michalak told this to CBC News and recalling that Saturday 50 years earlier. Within a couple of days, however, not only did he know more, so did much of the public. Michalak said, everything pretty much hit the fan when the story about my father being burned by a UFO ran in the Winnipeg Tribune. Welcome, Tina Tomaszewski. Tina is one of the original gangsters of Night Terrors. Thank you, Tina. The encounter. Well, let's take a look at the burns first. My goodness gracious. I don't think it would be too awfully gross if we took a close look at that. It looked like the doctors had to shave his chest. Let's open that image in a new tab and take a look at that. His father looks kind of elderly in this photo. Looks like 50s, eh? If not 60s. And the kid was only 9, huh? Or maybe maybe it's just the, because he has, looks like he's creasing his own flesh a little bit. Damn, look at those burns. Yeah, he must have had his chest shaved so that the burns could be treated. That's him in a hospital bed, I take it. To me, that guy looks like he's in his 50s. Stefan Michalak was an industrial mechanic by trade and an amateur geologist who liked to venture into the wilderness around Falcon Lake, 150 clicks east of Winnipeg, to prospect for silver and quartz. Maybe the silver's in the quartz? I thought quartz was associated with gold. Who knows? He had staked some claims the prior year and set out on the May long weekend in 1967 to explore some more. On May the 20th, Stefan was near a vein of quartz along the Precambrian Shield when the 51-year-old, 50s, I called it, was startled by a gaggle of nearby geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. Ooh, that's what he was wearing, huh? Ouch. According to his account, as reported in newspapers at the time, and since repeated in books, magazines, and on TV shows. Stefan looked up and saw 2 cigar-shaped objects with a reddish glow hovering about 45 meters away. One descended, according to Stefan's account, landing on a flat section of rock and taking on more of a disc shape. The other remained in the air for a few minutes before flying off. Believing this to be a secret U.S. military experimental craft in Canada, Stefan sat back and sketched it over the next half hour. Then he decided to approach, later recalling the warm air and smell of sulfur as he got closer, as well as a whirring sound of motors and a hissing of air. So they show his picture here. The picture he drew. I guess that must be it right there. Wow. Take a look at that. That's the original size right there. Something of the... That's English. Of something instrument. Rotor, perhaps? Of the sound of sucking air. Three by three fast closing exit. That's right here. 3 by 3 meters, perhaps? Positive metal. Steel, body, shell. Something color, like heated stainless steel. So kind of reddish orange. Dull red. Let's let the story tell us, shall we? He also noted the door opening on the side with bright lights inside, and said he heard voices muffled by sounds from the craft. He said he called out, offering his mechanical help to the Yankees if they needed it. The voices went quiet and did not answer. So Stefan tried in his native Polish, then in Russian, and finally in German. Only the hiss of the craft responded. He said he went closer and noted the smooth metal of the ship, no seams. He then looked into the bright doorway, pulling on the welding goggles he used to protect his eyes, while chipping at rocks during prospecting. Welding goggles, that's a really good protection against chipped rocks. Because today they do plastic, right? Plastic safety glasses. And there he is. The caption, Stefan Mikulak wearing the welding goggles he used to peer into the craft he encountered in Falcon Lake. Inside, Stefan said he saw light beams and panels of various colored flashing lights, but could not see anyone or any living thing. When he stepped away, 3 panels slid across the door opening and sealed it. Can we get rid of that ad? Apparently not. He reached out to touch the craft, which he said melted the fingertips of the glove he was wearing. The craft then began to turn counterclockwise, and Stefan says he noticed a panel that contained a grid of holes. Shortly after, he was struck in the chest by a blast of air or gas that pushed him backward and set his shirt and cap ablaze. He ripped away the burning garments as the craft lifted off and flew away. Disoriented, nauseous, Stefan stumbled through the forest and vomited. He made his way back to his motel room in Falcon Lake, then caught a bus back to Winnipeg. He was treated at a hospital for burns to his chest and stomach that later turned into raised sore. Excuse me. Raised sores in a grid-like pattern. Strawberry watermelon. He was treated at a hospital for burns. I read that already. And for weeks afterwards, he suffered from diarrhea, headaches, blackouts, weight loss. Once the story was out, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Air Force, the media, various government agencies, and hordes of gawking members of the public descended on the Michelaki's small River Heights bungalow in Winnipeg. That's who Michalak refers to in the title of the book. In the little. T. Plateau says you need to drink more water and less of that colored stuff. A dose of lemon, orange, and rinds. Cinnamon stick and a bit of ginger, boiled for 5 minutes on high and then strained and drank. Will clear you up. Thank you, T. Plateau. Welcome, Marty Price. Marty says, ask an AI, theoretically, how it could operate giving a visual report can be an interesting discussion. That's who Michalak refers to in the title of the book. Those endless visitors and phone calls. The media and people camping on the lawn. The people who would follow Michalak to school one day, peppering him with questions. When they appeared. Those guys that were bugging him. He said, it just flipped our lives over. It took years before it died down. After that, and until the day he died in 1999, at the age of 83, Stefan believed he never should have said a thing. I'm glad he did. That's according to Michalak, the son, I guess. But at the time, he felt it was a duty. He wanted others, if they were to see the same thing, to avoid it and not get hurt. In Poland, before Stefan moved his family to Canada, he was a military policeman with a set of moral guidelines by which he lived. If something happens, it should be reported. In addition to constant probing from authorities, the family endured condemnation and criticism in the public. Stefan's sanity was questioned and Michalak was bullied in school. Though he wished he hadn't said anything, Stefan never backed away from the story. He also never claimed to have seen aliens, and still considered it a secret military craft. Michalak said if you asked him what it was he saw, he would describe it in intimate detail. But he would never say, oh, it was definitely extraterrestrials, because there was no evidence to prove that. He might ask, what do you think I saw? But right up until he died, his story never changed one iota. Nothing about it or how he told it. End quote. In all those years since, and with some 300 pages of documentation on the encounter, Michalak said, there's nothing so far that has flawed his story. Michalak said, I'm not so close-minded that I can't entertain the possibility that it was otherworldly. I can't discount that. But without specific evidence to show me that it is, I don't know. Like father, like son. Quote, what I can tell you is I'm an aviation fanatic. a huge buff, and I'm very familiar with how aviation technology has advanced in the past 50 years. And there was nothing even close to that in the works anywhere at that time. The case was investigated intensely by a number of levels of government. The official conclusion, even from the U.S. Air Force, was that the case was unexplained. He said the Falcon Lake incident is possibly Canada's best documented UFO case, he being Rutkowski. It even beats Roswell, the flying disc that landed in New Mexico in 1947, 21 years previous, 21 years prior. Because the United States still doesn't recognize that anything happened in Roswell. Items were later retrieved from the encounter site, including Stefan's glove and shirt and some tools, which were subjected to extensive analysis at a Royal Canadian Mounted Police crime lab. No one could determine what caused the burns. Sounds like what he had was radiation sickness, though, right? At the landing site was a circle about 15 feet in diameter, devoid of moss and vegetation growing in other areas of the same rock outcropping. Soil samples, along with samples of clothing, were tested and deemed to be highly radioactive. So were pieces of metal that were chipped out of cracks in the rock about a year after the incident. The metal had somehow been melted into the cracks. This is amazing. Many of the items have long since been lost, as they were transferred through various authorities and agencies. However, Rutkowski and Michalak still have one of the pieces of metal which remains radioactive. Still sick in 1968 with recurrences of the burns showing up on his chest and suffering from blackouts, Stefan went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Doctors did a thorough examination and even sent him to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist came back with a report that this fellow is very pragmatic and down to earth and does not make up stories. Michalak said, "If Dad hoaxed this, remember we're talking about a blue-collar industrial mechanic. If he hoaxed it, then he was a freaking genius," end quote. That's the end of the story. Cool beans, man. Elder says you would think aliens would be smart enough to shield their nuclear reactors properly. Like they care what they do to us, right? All right, next up. At 19 minutes past the hour. Is a suggestion from Verpine. That means I have to duplicate this and go back one, right? That is correct. Duplicate. Why can't I go back on that one? Where can I go back? Or is it not highlighting? Is that the problem? No, it is supposed to be highlighting. Let's just go to search. So we'll just go home. We'll switch with DuckDuckGo this time. Elder says, dang those lax alien regulations. This from Verpine. The Robert Taylor UFO incident. The UFO sighting investigated by the police. That at bbc.com. Let's try Scottish Daily Express. Because it happened in Scotland, evidently. Here at scottishDailyExpress.co.uk. There's a story by Douglas Dickey entitled Scotland's Most Mysterious UFO Case that was investigated by police and has never been explained. Mr. Dickey begins. The world's interest in extraterrestrial life has been reignited after claims were made that non-human bodies were found at a potential UFO site in the U.S. At a committee hearing in Washington, members of Congress heard remarkable suggestions of alien technology defying the laws of physics, while the Pentagon revealed it had received hundreds of reports after saying it would renew efforts to investigate cases of UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, to give their official name. While America is the hotspot for UFO sightings, Scotland has also had its fair share. And a talk next month will feature one such event, believed to be the only one in the world, to prompt a forensic police investigation. Paranormal researcher Malcolm Robinson will explore the Robert Taylor incident, which took place on a hill near Livingston in West Lothian. Forester Robert Taylor was on Decmont Law, where he claimed to have been almost abducted. He emerged from the hill with torn clothes and grazes to his chin and thighs, claiming a flying dome had tried to pull him aboard. The incident has gone on to become one of the most compelling UFO sightings in the world. Robert was working for the Livingston Development Corp. when he parked up near the M8 motorway and made his way along a forest path at the side of Decmont Law on November the 9th, 1979. He later reported seeing a spherical object around 21 feet in diameter, hovering above the forest floor, about a half a click away. Let's get rid of this ad. I hope no one's hearing this. No, no one's hearing it. That's good. He claimed it was a dark metallic material with a rough texture like sandpaper and an outer rim set with small propellers. At this point, Robert reported a foul odor similar to burning brakes. Thank you, Elder, for the link. Let's see what Elder has given us. 1, 2. That's pretty cool, Elder. And I think we're here. Yeah. Burning brakes. He then said smaller fears that resembled sea mines grabbed him and were dragging him towards the larger object. At that point, he lost consciousness, and when he awoke around 20 minutes later, he was alone. His truck would not start, so he walked back home to Livingston. Robert arrived home in what his wife described as a disheveled state, muddy with torn clothes and He was treated for the injuries to his chin and thighs. A report was made to the police. They returned to the site, where they discovered ladder-shaped marks in the ground where Robert said he had seen the larger object. There were other marks Robert was sure had been made by the smaller objects, while the rips in his clothes were said to have been caused by a sharp pull upward, such as that caused by a mechanical device. The officers recorded it as a criminal assault. The story immediately captured people's imagination. A qualified physician suggested Robert, who had previously suffered from meningitis, had suffered an isolated attack of temporal lobe epilepsy, which had caused hallucinations. Another theory is that he suffered a mini stroke or had been exposed to harmful chemicals. Robert passed away in 2007, having never deviated from his story. In 2018, the West Lothian Council erected a trail on Deckmont for anyone wanting to follow in his footsteps. One person who believes it could have been a genuine UFO encounter is Mr. Robinson, an author and founder of Strange Phenomena Investigations, who visited the scene with Robert the next day. Speaking to the Scotsman in 2012, he said, "About 95% of UFO sightings have a natural solution, but it's the 5% minority that we're trying to provide answers for which we are trying to provide answers." Don't end your sentences with a preposition. He said, "I was there the following day. I saw the marks and I met Bob, who struck me as very sane, very rational, a gentleman who did not want any of the publicity into which he had been thrust. He never changed his story. To his dying day, he said, 'Until the end of time, I will say I saw what I saw.'" Mr. Robinson will host a talk on the incident in Livingston on Sunday, August the 6th, at the Almond Suite, the McCure Livingston Hotel, from 7:30 to 9:30. He will provide the full story on a PowerPoint visual lecture before retired police officer Ian Wark takes the audience through the police investigation. Well, I got to see this hotel. Be nice if we could see the Almond Suite. The McCure Livingston Hotel, huh? Let's see if we can find that immediately from its unusual name. I'm thinking not a chain. Okay. We copied that. Let's go to search at a regular search engine. Plug in the hotel name. There it is. Where is it, though? McCure Livingston Hotel. Reservation desk. Where's the hotel itself? There's McCureLivingston.co.uk. Scotland. It was unique. Rooms. Room types. Room types. Classic. Privilege. Room gallery. Oh, no, we want to see event stuff. Event pictures, right? Events. Room layout for events. Wedding and event rooms. That's what we want. The Almond Suite. Is that the one? That was the one, right? Where's the story? There we go. The Almond Suite, indeed. Whoa. Nice. That only have one page on it. The Burns Suite. Wait, we can't see the picture bigger. Well, that's kind of a small picture there for your big suite you're charging many pounds for, or whatever they use in Scotland. And that's going to be very, very low resolution. Oh, not too bad. So here's an all-encompassing view of the almond room, where at some day in some past August, you could have heard this talk. Not the thrill I thought it was going to be. Next up, a suggestion from Takahama Olsen 2 or T Plateau. Take your pick. At 31 minutes past the hour. To wit. And let's go here. There we go. Whoops. Paste, please. It's not pasting. There we go. Who killed Debbie Lindsley in 1988 in London? Let's look at the story in morbidology.com. In an article by Emily G. Thompson entitled The Railway Ripper, the unsolved unaliving of Deborah Lindsley. I keep wanting to say Lindsay. Deborah Lindsley. Download PDF. No, we don't want to do that. Deny those things, whatever they are. This looks a little big. Ooh. Oh, cool. Gotcha, man. Thank you. I will do that. Let me get a screen capture here. Thank you, G-Man. And Ms. Thompson begins. On March the 23rd, 1988, Deborah Lindsley was found unalive from stab wounds on a London train. Despite having a DNA profile of the killer, the murder remains unsolved. What a shame. Deborah was born on October the 20th, 1961. And she would have been a contemporary of mine. I was born in 60. In Bromley, Kent, to Arthur and Marguerite Lindsley. She grew up in a supportive household, excelling academically, leaving high school with an impressive array of A levels. But Deborah's ambitions stretched far beyond the classroom. She dreamed of carving a name for herself in the competitive catering industry. By her mid-20s, she had achieved remarkable progress, securing a position as a hotel manager in Edinburgh, Scotland. I would freak out if it was the same hotel. 26-year-old Deborah returned home to Bromley to attend a hotel management course in London. Staying with her parents for the duration of the training, she made time to reconnect with family. On March the 23rd, she enjoyed lunch with her brother Gordon before he drove her to Petswood Station to catch a London commuter train bound for King's Cross. From there, she planned to board a train back to Scotland to resume her thriving career. The train Deborah boarded at 2:16 p.m. Wait, there's Deborah. I thought that up there was Deborah. Oh, same chick. That's the same girl, right? Yeah. Yeah, it is. Was relatively quiet because it was during off-peak service, with around 70 passengers spread across its 4 carriages. This is the train Deborah boarded, 2:16 p.m. Seeking some solitude, she chose a seat in a single-compartment carriage. The compartments were self-contained, with a single door to the outside and no interior passage to other carriages. They offered privacy, but at a cost. You might say privacy. Once the train was in motion, passengers in these compartments were effectively isolated. That's interesting. I wonder why that was. Rhino Rex likes the name of the website, Morbidology. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The train made its way to the South London suburbs, stopping at Bickley, Bromley South, Shortlands, Beckingham Junction, Kent House, Pang East, Sydenham Hill, West Dulwich, Herne Hill, and Brixton. At 2:50 p.m., it arrived at Victoria Station, and passengers disembarked. As was standard procedure, a British Rail employee began inspecting the carriages to ensure they were empty. When he entered Deborah's compartment, he was met with a horrifying scene. Blood spattered the walls, the seats, and Deborah's lifeless body lay on the floor. Deborah had been stabbed multiple times in a brutal attack, with wounds to her face, neck, and abdomen. 5 of them targeted her heart. Defensive injuries on her hands bore testament to her desperate struggle against her killer. Trapped in the isolated compartment with no means of escape, she had fought for her life against a merciless attack. I know, right, Tina? The investigation into Deborah's murder began immediately, but it was quickly apparent that identifying her killer would be an uphill battle. None of the passengers on the train reported hearing or seeing anything suspicious. Despite the frenzied nature of the attack, investigators concluded that the noise of the moving train likely masked her screams. Detectives ruled out common motives such as robbery or SA. Deborah's handbag and holdall were undisturbed, and there was no evidence to suggest she had been SA'd. The ferocity of the crime pointed instead to a deeply disturbed individual. Yeah, it sounds like a personal attack. Detective Superintendent Guy Mills, leading the case, did not mince words when he described the perpetrator as a ruthless animal. He also issued a damning critique of the single-compartment trains, calling them death traps that left passengers, particularly women, with no means of escape. His warnings echoed growing concerns about these carriages, which had already been linked to a series of SA crimes. Military policeman John Cartwright had even appealed... MP. Member of Parliament John Cartwright had even appealed for their withdrawal prior to Deborah's unaliving. British rail policy stated that the 116 single-compartment coaches should only be used during peak hours, when their compartments would be crowded, making attack less likely. However, this policy had clearly been ignored. A Southern Region spokesman admitted that Deborah should not have been in one of those carriages during off-peak service. Despite mounting pressure to phase out the compartments immediately, British Rail announced they would remain in operation at least until 1991, sparking public outrage. In response, detectives issued a stark warning to women. Avoid traveling alone in these closed compartments. The public's assistance was vital, and the police appealed for anyone with information to come forward. Investigators believed Deborah had fought valiantly against her killer. Not only believed, if there's defensive wounds, there's evidence of that. Defensive wounds, of course, meaning marks on what you hold up to defend yourself. Marks on hands and arms. Detective Superintendent Mills, Detective Superintendent Mills urged potential witnesses to report any sightings of a blood-stained man disembarking the train. Mills stated, "All we know is that he is male and powerful," emphasizing the importance of identifying every passenger on the train that day. Tina says there are some sick people in the world. No doubt, Tina. Elder says untreated mental illness. You gotta be a special kind of mentally ill to do something like this. A breakthrough came when detectives received reports of a man behaving suspiciously at Orpington Station before boarding the train. Witnesses said he'd been staring intently at women, and his unsettling demeanor raised red flags. Another lead emerged the following day. A passenger came forward to describe seeing a man jump out of a single compartment at Penghi Station during the journey. The man then dashed along the platform and re-entered the train by way of an open compartment at the front. The suspect was described as being in his late 20s or early 30s, stocky, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall. Witnesses noted his distinctive appearance: thick, solid legs, shoulder-length, dirty blonde hair that was scruffy and curly, and an overall unkempt appearance. Investigators believed this was the same man seen loitering at Orpington Station, and they focused their efforts on tracking him down. In the hunt for the killer, detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events of that fateful day. A composite sketch of a man seen acting suspiciously was created. The same man, I assume. A man seen acting suspiciously. Got to be the same man, right? Excuse me, I need to access this side of the studio. Thank you for your patience. P. Plateau says, such a shame they can't finish these cases off. They have profiles of offenders but won't inform the public. If the offender passed away, at least tell the public. But there seems to be more going on with these. Perhaps high-profile offenders, for example, police or politicians. or rich people, right? The 1%. Thank you, Maccabeus. The unknown suspect earned the grim moniker of the Railway Ripper. Witnesses described him as being in his late 20s or 30s. Stocky. We just read that. With shoulder-length, scruffy blonde hair. Did they say they had DNA as well? However, another possible suspect emerged. Reports surfaced of a second man, seen leaving the train at Victoria Station shortly after the murder. He was 6 feet tall, in his 40s, heavily built with ginger hair and a thin mustache. Witnesses recalled hearing a commotion from a carriage in the area where Deborah was unalived. This further complicated the investigation. Detectives initially theorized that the murder may have been a failed attempt at SA. They believed Deborah's resistance had escalated the violence, culminating in her unalivement or her death. The weapon, thought to be a knife with a 7-inch blade, became a key focus of the search. Investigators combed the train tracks and embankments along the route in a desperate bid to locate it, but it was never found. As the investigation stalled, police retraced Deborah's final journey, even enlisting a female detective to replicate her movements in the hope of jogging the memories of witnesses. Despite their efforts, no new leads surfaced. By April, the case was featured on the BBC's Crime Watch, and a £30,000 reward for information was offered. Jointly funded by Ladbrokes Hotels and 2 private consortia. Evidently, that's where she worked, the Ladbrokes. The public response was significant, but even with these measures, progress was slow. Police later determined that the 2 suspects initially described were likely different individuals. The reconstruction of Deborah's last movements, that must be that policewoman. Despite their exhaustive efforts, the investigation began to lose momentum. By the end of '88, over 1,200 witness statements had been taken, and 650 individuals were questioned and ruled out. In November of that year, an inquest highlighted a critical moment that might have changed the course of the investigation. A French student who had been on the train testified to hearing screams of fear from a woman during the journey. And why the hell didn't you do anything about it? Makes me ashamed of my heritage. I'm 50% French and 50% English and 1/32 Blackfoot Indian. She described the cries. It was a woman. I don't know. I think I would have gone to check it out. She described the cries as very, very loud and recalled the victim calling out for help. But fear had paralyzed her, preventing her from pulling the emergency alarm or contacting the authorities when she disembarked. What? Come on. So sad. The coroner, Dr. Netman, criticized the student's inaction. I criticize it as well. Makes me ashamed of my heritage. By 1990, the investigation had been scaled back to just 3 detectives. but a significant breakthrough had emerged. A DNA profile of the killer was created from samples found at the crime scene. At the time, forensic DNA technology was in its infancy, but advances in the field gave detectives hope. In 2002, the case was reopened, and a complete DNA profile was built using improved techniques. A profile was run through the National DNA Database, but no match was found. In 2013, detectives turned to familial DNA tracing, which could identify potential relatives of the killer who might have been entered into the database for minor offenses. Once again, they left the trail cold. Wow. Despite these setbacks, Deborah's father, Arthur, remained hopeful. In 2013, he stated, "In the struggle with the attacker, Debbie injured him. So we have his DNA. It was blood samples. Interesting. But the amazing thing is he's not in the database. This development brings us hope that we can finally get closure. It would mean everything to us." Today, Deborah Lindsley's murder remains unsolved. Her family continues to seek justice for the vivacious young woman. Welcome, James, who had so much to live for. Anyone with information that could help solve this decades-old case is urged to contact the Metropolitan Police at let's get it big here, shall we? At 0207-230-4294, or call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 0800-555-111. Okay, people, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. That's why I want you to follow Tina Tomaszewski. And there's the Tina alarm. I anticipated it tonight. Follow Tina over to Dark Sayings with Peter McCarthy, who's going to be live on YouTube in 6.5 minutes. So be there or be square. Don't forget to catch the video on Wednesday. It really helps my numbers. And until next Saturday, may God bless and protect us all.